Hello and welcome back to another episode of CharlaFootball. I'm your host, as always, Gerardo Jerry Tavares, always accompanied by my special co-host over here, Tomas Estrada. How you doing on this amazing day of Champions League football? We saw the quarterfinals get wrapped up. How you doing, bro?
Terrible, bro.
Why? What the fuck? What happened?
Parlay did not hit, bro.
So
We're not
you
eating.
don't bet, bro. You can't
We
bet
are,
on these kind of games.
we are not eating this week. We're not eating this week, bro.
How much did you bet, bro? Like, come on.
Bro. I could still like kick it on your couch, right?
Yeah, bro. You're always welcome to the pad, bro. Even inside of the studio here, I got some futon couches you can lay down and chill on.
That's that might be needed.
So, like I said, a lot of stuff happened in the past 2 days in the Champions League. We saw the second leg of quarterfinals finally wrapped up. Some shockers, real surprising shockers, and we're going to talk about City, Madrid, Arsenal, Barcelona versus PSG, and then Dortmund, Atletico to end it all off. Make sure to follow CharlaFootball. Make sure to follow us. I'll link the website down below. I'll also put links to me and Tomas's personal accounts as well down below. What else? I think that's pretty much it. Let's get right into Manchester City versus Real Madrid because that's the game that happened today. That was probably the most entertaining game since last week, pretty much, and everyone was kind of looking forward to that one. Like we've already talked about, it's a final being played in the quarterfinals. It was a little early for our expectations. Ultimately, it was a 4-4 aggregate with Madrid advancing on penalties. Real Madrid clinching their 12th semifinal in the last 14 seasons. And if you think about it, they have eliminated the reigning champs 6 times in the knockout stages. So I just wanted to throw that in because, I mean, when you think about Real Madrid, a lot of people tend to throw them out of the equation, even though they're quite literally the best team in Europe. And regardless of form, which they've been in incredible form in recently, but obviously a lot of people had Manchester City as the favorites. And I don't know. I mean, did you think Man City were favorites over Madrid in this tie?
I think they were just because they were closing in at home. Like what was it 2 years ago? Real Madrid closes at home, and they're considered favorites because you're closing at the Bernabeu. And then last year, Man City closes at Manchester, and well, that's my thought process. When that closes, usually the favorites. So Man City was the favorite team. Real Madrid they were just able to get it done.
Yeah, on the day, I mean, once you saw Rodrigo get that first goal, the tensions were pretty much high, and it was an early goal. It was like within the first 20-30 minutes, right?
I think it was between the first 10 minutes.
Really? It was that early?
I think it was that early.
And that completely changed the game because, at least for Madrid's standpoint, because you already knew they were going to come out defensively, but I mean, once they got that goal, it gave them something to hold on to, and that's pretty much what happened throughout the whole match. There wasn't really too much going on, at least in an attacking sense for Madrid. Maybe like a few half chances here and there, but it was all Manchester City from the moment Real Madrid scored on them.
Yeah. I mean, it was just complete domination. They were just touching the ball through the midfield, doing whatever they wanted to the ball, doing whatever they wanted with the ball, but scoring. In the first half, they could not finish anything.
And something that we discussed is the substitutions. Substitutions completely changed the dynamic of the match. I think the first sub was for Jack Grealish
Doku.
and Doku, which was a much needed sub because Grealish wasn't really dangerous on that side. But most of the subs were later on into the game because you can tell that Madrid were really looking to either ending the game in the 90 minutes, holding on as much as possible, or sorry about that, or also if they got scored on, taking it all the way to extra time.
Yeah, and which they did get scored on with a perfect sub from Jeremy Doku. You gotta Pep really knows when to put players in, and he put in a solid Jeremy Doku, and he was able to get a shot off, and De Bruyne is right there for the rebound.
Mm-hmm. I agree that the subs were much needed because some of these players just weren't cutting it. Now, some of the questionable subs going into extra time, once they had already got that 1-1, were the likes of Akanji coming off, Kevin De Bruyne, and Holland. Because once you see that they go into penalties, you could really use these players. You know, you need at least the Kevin De Bruynes and the Hollands to step up. And something that we had also noted was that Rodri didn't step up at all to take a penalty instead of Mateo Kovacic, who, I mean, we didn't really expect for him to slot his away, and that's pretty much what happened.
I mean, yeah, like Rodri just being the designated penalty taker, or well, it looks like to be the designated penalty taker for Spain. You'd expect him to take a penalty today, and then with the subs, taking Erling Haaland off, taking De Bruyne off. It's just what if they were in those positions where I don't know, De Bruyne takes it instead of Bernardo Silva. Or you throw Erling Haaland in there and you get Kovacic out of there. You put Rodri. These three penalty takers that are used to these moments where they've been in many shootouts and they were able to bury the ball.
Hmm.
And I just don't understand why it came to players like, no disrespect to Kovacic, but Kovacic taking a penalty kick in a decisive game when there's just better penalty takers. There
Yeah,
just is. No
I
disrespect to
I,
him.
I
I know
no,
he's a good penalty taker. He's gotten some in for Croatia, but I just don't. I just think there was better penalty takers today.
yeah, especially on the city squad when you have a stacked squad. I mean, there's definitely better ones, like you said. Going back to the substitutions for Akanji, KDB, and Holland, something that was really interesting to me was that they were the ones that asked for the sub. So Manuel Akanji, Kevin De Bruyne, and Holland had asked to be subbed off during extra time, and that's something that Pep Guardiola confirmed in his post-match conference. Now, in the likes of Erling Haaland, Erling Haaland is regarded as one of the best footballers in the world. But how can you be regarded as one of the best footballers in the world if, I mean, you're getting asked to get subbed off? You know, you don't see the likes of Ronaldo, Neymar, Hazard, Gareth Bale asking for a substitution when their team needs them the most. You know, these are the players. These players want to be on the pitch, and the fact that Erling Haaland asked for a sub, which was pretty weird to me, and I wanted to get your opinion on that. Like, how do you feel like Erling Haaland will be regarded as one of the world's best footballers if he's over here asking for subs, basically?
I mean, he is one of the world's best footballers. The part of asking for a sub is very. It's something that I wouldn't be able to offend of his character, but for what he's done for the sport, he is one of the world's best footballers. You're talking to a Champions League winner, Premier League winner. He's won practically everything you can in England, and just asking for a sub, I don't think it taints that image, but it definitely questions his character. Where it's like, in the moment where you're needed the most, you don't not necessarily show up because he tries to get a couple shots on it. He did get a header that hits off the post.
Hmm.
He holds up the ball pretty well for Manchester City, especially against a team like Real Madrid. But to not go through the full game, not
Yeah,
not go through the penalty process, because really it was looking like penalties. The game was pretty. I wouldn't say boring, but it had been subpar to what it was during the first 90 minutes, which is expected. These players are tired. But I mean, everybody could see it usually going into that direction, and getting subbed off or asking for a sub off when you're one of the best penalty takers in the world, which is Erling Haaland, and especially De Bruyne, who is one of the best penalty takers right now. And I would say it's more acceptable from De Bruyne, coming off of an injury.
hmm,
But then again, you'd argue that Erling Haaland also had somewhat of an injury earlier this season. But if I would compare it to the likes of Ronaldo and Messi and were in their character, they were never subbed off for their team. The only way I could defend it is saying that those teams didn't have the quality where you're having Stones come in for De Bruyne, or you're having Julian Alvarez coming in for Erling Haaland.
hmm.
Maybe you could justify it in that way. But if I'm Erling Haaland, I'm not taking that sub. If I'm De Bruyne, I'm not taking that sub. I'm definitely wouldn't say
You're fighting to be on the pitch
I'm
all
fighting
game.
to be on the pitch the whole game, and I'm
Yeah,
fighting for my team to just advance at least. Everything else after could be maybe I get injured, but we advance. Maybe That's all that matters.
Hmm.
If I think that my team has quality, why not save that quality for the next round for them?
Now that's where I feel like the mentality of Madrid and mentality of Manchester City just kind of comes into question, because we all know that Madrid have an impeccable mentality. I mean, they're known for their mentality, especially when they're against all odds. But
Yeah,
on the day, do you think Madrid's mentality overtook Manchester City?
no, because I mean, Benny also takes a sub off. There's also players that get subbed off.
Yeah.
They're really just tired. Where physically they can't anymore. But I would say that these players really, for Madrid at least, they played physically all they could. They really defended the whole game, and maybe they were really just on the floor. Like they couldn't get up without any help.
Now, I would argue that Madrid's mentality was greater on the day, because I mean you see it on their face, you see the way that they step up to the penalties. I mean, the instance that really stands out to me is Lucas Vasquez, where once again he's stepping up in a crucial moment for his team. While he might not be one of the most influential players out of the 11, I mean he's one of the captains of the squad because of that experience and because of his mentality. And he steps up to the plate. He steps up for his penalty. He's like juggling the ball. And that's something I called out when we were watching the game. I was like, look, he's juggling before his PK. And it's something that he's done before in the Champions League final against Atletico Madrid, where he's spinning the ball on his finger. So to have that kind of balls of steel in the quarterfinals of the Champions League, I mean, I think that just speaks levels of mentality. And then you see Rudiger when he steps up for what ends up being the winning PK. I mean, you see the conviction on his face. Like he knows he's going to bury it.
Okay. Yeah, I'd say that the five penalty takers versus the five penalty takers of Real Madrid were Real Madrid's penalty takers had a way more mentality than City's. But then again, City's penalty takers weren't their usual starters
Yeah, they weren't the ones that you would expect,
to take the
basically, to
penalty.
take the
Yeah.
penalties. Because I agree, it should have been Kevin De Bruyne in there. There should have been a Rodri stepping up. There should have been an early Holland. Now, yeah, maybe because of injuries or because of how the game has gone through, and you have to keep in mind that they're still in a title race. Pretty much, they have all to play for. Versus Madrid, they're pretty comfortable right now. They do have El Clásico coming up this weekend, but they're in control of their own destiny. While so are Man City, the margins are a lot slimmer than what Madrid's are.
You have 2 points.
Now, a place and a game that was pretty slim, and even on the day, only a 1-0 result. Bayern ended up coming up bigger. Bayern versus Arsenal on aggregate, it was a 3-2 score after the first leg was 2-2. Why isn't that Arsenal cannot step up in the games where it really matters? We saw it over the weekend against Aston Villa in a crucial game for the title race. They slip up there, 2-0 loss against Villa, and we're seeing it again right here in the quarterfinals of the Champions League, where they were pretty much silent throughout the game. And I think something that kind of just wraps up the game as a whole was the very last kick of the game. There's a corner kick that Bukayo Saka steps up to, and he takes it, and you got all of your players inside of the box waiting to get their head, trying to save the game. And Bukayo Saka couldn't even get it past the first man at the first post, and that's where the game ends. These players are expected so much more for the money that they're making, for the luxury of life that they that they live, and I mean to be performing like that in the quarterfinals of the Champions League. Why aren't they stepping up?
I mean, the thing is that who did they lose to?
Bayern Munich. And
Exactly.
it's the worst squad, one of the worst Bayern Munichs that we have seen in recent history.
So you're saying that this is the worst Bayern Munich team in history?
Yeah, I mean, if you see their performances in the league, I mean, you got your head coach basically resigning like mid-season and kind of throwing away the league. Is like, well, you guys figure it out. I'm going to leave at the end of the season anyways. But they're putting all their chips into the Champions League. So that's kind of like the difference between, I would say, this Arsenal team and Bayern, where Bayern have pretty much nothing else to play for but the Champions League.
Yeah, and I mean, you see that you could really tell because Bayern plays completely different to how they play in the Bundesliga, and it's pretty much unfair to say that okay, this is the worst Arsenal team, but by Bundesliga standards, how they finished in the league.
You mean Bayern team?
Yeah, the Bayern team. It's
Oh,
how they're finishing in the league. But then again, Real Madrid has finished third in La Liga and won the Champions League.
hmm.
So it's not really it's kind of what is the team playing for? Teams like Barca or teams like City, they usually put all their chips into the Prem or to the La Liga. Where you really want to win your league, and teams like Madrid and Bayern, who have also been consistent in Bundesliga, really want to win the Champions League. Especially Madrid, they don't really, obviously they care how they do in the league, but there's been instances where they're doing bad in the league, and that doesn't really matter as long as they win the Champions League.
Hmm.
Now, for Arsenal, I mean, Arsenal, this is a process. This reminds me of City in 2016, 2017, 2017, 2018, where, they're getting to this instances of quarterfinals, but they just can't find that breakthrough where they get into semis, where they get into the final. Not quite yet. And it really reminds me because it's the same exact system. You just need these players to develop a little bit more in that system where you get players like, De Bruyne now, which is like feared, really feared. Every time Kevin De Bruyne lines up for a shot, everybody's really just standing up and just watching, because you're waiting for something to happen. And if Arsenal goes through this process, they'll reach the levels of what Man City has gotten, which is a Champions League.
I feel like they're just missing those few key players, like that killer. They need that Erling Haaland pretty much
Erling
up
Haaland
top,
and
pretty much. But I
a
mean,
strong Rodri. I mean, because I don't know. We'll keep that debate for later, which is the little that West Ham player. West Ham player.
now before we get into that, I thought it was funny that if you really think about it, Eric Dyer has now been in as many Champions League semifinals as Arsenal have been in their history, and that's kind of crazy coming from, let's see, Eric Dyer. He's coming from Tottenham. So is Harry Kane, two Tottenham players. Being able to knock out Arsenal in the quarterfinals, I'm sure they're probably elated. Like, this is probably one of the best days in their life.
I mean, they still need to win a trophy.
Yeah, but I mean, you can still celebrate the present, bro. Like, come on, like, don't you
Yeah,
can't knock.
You can celebrate. How would I say this? You can celebrate advancing only for like a week, but you can celebrate a trophy forever.
True. Now, when we're thinking about the game, and this is what you were talking about, Joshua Kimmich was the one that ended up breaking through, and I thought it was pretty. It was crazy to see him pretty much unmarked when the cross from Rafael Guerreiro comes in. You see the likes of Declan Rice, who is that six. He's the defensive midfielder that should be, aware of everything that's happening in and around the box and moving forward. And Gabriel Martinelli, the same. He was the one tracking Joshua Kimmich because technically that's his man if Joshua Kimmich is playing right back.
Yeah,
And they're just ball watching. When the cross is coming in, they're watching Rafael Guerreiro shape up for that cross, but they're not seeing a full sprint coming from Joshua Kimmich outside the box, running in and then thundering it past David Raya. And there's been a lot of talk about Declan Rice's signing. Declan Rice, there's no doubt that he's an incredible player, but was it really the player that Arsenal needed? When it comes to these big moments. When it comes to the Portos, when it comes to the Aston Villas, when it comes to the Bayern Munichs, in the games that matters the most. And something that you and I we wanted to ask West Ham fans, if there's any listening, let us know down below who's the better defensive midfielder, Edson Alvarez or Declan Rice, because Edson Alvarez, when when he's in the team and he's fully fit for West Ham, he's probably their best player, and in his time, Declan Rice was as well. That's why he made that move to Arsenal. But I mean, you're seeing just these little lapses of distraction that kind of separate the two, and it separates like the world class defensive midfielder from just a defensive midfielder.
yeah. I mean, the thing about the sixth position, why I always hated playing it growing up is because defensively you have to be aware of what's in front of you and what's behind you. You know, you have to be aware of the 10 coming towards you and also those players making the runs in behind you because you know if a winger's making a run in behind you and you press the 10, well he's just gonna lay it off wide. So you really have to be aware of what's behind you and what's in front of you.
Hmm.
And Declan Rice is just, I mean, he's the in front of him. He's always aware. He's good if it's in front of him, but behind him, he doesn't. It's something basic, you know. You check your shoulders. You hear it growing up every day. You know, check your shoulders. You know, look at what's behind you, and it's just elementary like error that really needs to be fixed. Now to the Edson Alvarez thing or Declan Rice defensively. Well, Edson Alvarez has been better defensively than Declan Rice with West Ham. You know,
That's
these
true.
are the stats with West Ham. Now, and a lot of Arsenal fans have began to question Declan Rice and you know have moved their eyes to Edson Alvarez and they're looking. You know, Edson Alvarez might be the next player you need
Hmm.
because Declan Rice really just he's cutting it for what for this development that Arsenal has had. But if you really want to, you know, cement that position, Enzo Alvarez is a player that could definitely do that, especially in a position with like Arteta's, like how Arteta likes to play the sixth role. Because Edson Alvarez comes from Ajax, where the sixth role is played how Arteta likes, you know, in that possession-based system, which comes from Spain, which came to City, and Arteta, which was under Pep, left to Arsenal.
Hmm. That'd be interesting. I would love to see someone like Essen Alvarez at Arsenal. Maybe he can get them out the mud because right now it's not looking too great. But like you said, it's a process.
It's a
Now,
problem.
moving forward, let's look at the semifinal matchup real quick between Bayern and Madrid because that's how this semifinal ended up looking out. It's a familiar matchup between the both teams. They've seen each other plenty of times in these instances, semifinals, quarterfinals, with Madrid heavily being favorites just because throughout history they've always gotten better of Bayern Munich. But if you think about those times, I mean, Real Madrid had the likes of the Di Marias, the Gareth Bale, Benzema, and Cristiano Ronaldo, and now they don't have any of that. Yeah, you still have a dangerous attack with Vinicius, Bellingham, and Rodrigo, but you cannot tell me that they are even close to what Gareth Bale, Benzema, and Ronaldo were at their prime. So my hot take, what I believe, is that Bayern Munich defeat Madrid across the two legs. I'm not saying it's going to be a clear win, but I think Bayern Munich, because of the fact that they have really nothing else to play for since Leverkusen already wrapped up the league, their main focus and only focus is going to be the Champions League. Let's see what we can do here. This is the only silverware that we're going to be able to get at the end of the season. So why not put in all your chips here? And while Madrid are kind of comfortable in their league, they do, like I said, have the Clasico coming up this weekend. And if they were to suffer a loss, it's only going to put more pressure on them. And it's only going to make this Champions League run a lot more difficult. So, I don't know. My prediction is Bayern Munich going through over Madrid. What about you?
I think that if you're able to beat City at home, a City team that outplays you, a City team that player by player is better to what the system they have is, where their system is more effective than yours, where their system is just more entertaining to watch, where their system is that they build up way better than any team in Europe right now. Because Madrid do advance because Ancelotti is a tactical genius and he knows how to have a team that's able to suffer defensively. But Pep is the better coach in terms of implementing a system. Ancelotti's a better coach in the terms of implementing his tactics. But City was the better team overall. The thing is that football is not about what team was better. Football is the team that takes it, that wants it, and that's what's beautiful about it. So the thing is that if Madrid's able to go to City and take it in their own stadium, I just don't see why they wouldn't be able to do that throughout the rest of the tournament.
Hmm.
You know, taking it from Bayern and then eventually taking the championship. I just don't see why they wouldn't be able to.
So you have Madrid going through pretty much
I have
over
Madrid
Bayern.
going through just because in the beginning of this quarterfinal matchup, I said that the winner comes out of City versus Madrid, And no matter what fan base it was, about 90% of them agreed. 10% being Arsenal who didn't agree. But anyways,
We'll see how that shapes up moving forward into the semifinals. Now let's look at the other legs that happened yesterday because we weren't able to cover that yesterday since I like to do these wrap up once everything's already finalized. Barcelona and PSG in a very entertaining matchup where there was a lot of high hopes for Barcelona. Barcelona were coming from that 3-2 win at the Parc des Princes, and you're closing your game at home. You know, the stadium's going crazy. You know, this is probably one of the biggest matches that they've had in years. And then you also get that early goal from Lamine Yamal, and everything appears to be looking great. And unfortunately, the rules of the game are the rules of the game, and if it's a red card, it's a red card. And that's what happened. There was a silly mistake from Ronald Araujo, probably one of the worst decisions he's ever made as a Barcelona player, by fouling Bradley Barcola. And because he's the last man, he has to get the red card, even if it was a soft challenge. And I think most people agree it was a soft challenge, but he was through on goal. So now the question that I have is, if you're Araujo, should you have just let Barcola go on and shoot? Make Ter Stegen try to make a save or even suffer a goal because you're already 1-0 up. What would you do if you're Araujo in that situation? I know that you're thinking, you don't want to get scored on because you don't want PSG to come back because they have the ability to come back. But do you think he was just thinking so much with just passion versus logically?
it was definitely a passion over logic type of tackle. But also, defenders need to remember this. A penalty, causing a penalty when a player is through on goal is no longer a red card offense. It's a yellow card offense. So if you really think that that player is going to score, let him get into the penalty box
And then foul him?
and then foul him. Because if you truly think that that player is going to finish, that's the smartest thing to do. Because then you cause a penalty, your goalkeeper has a better opportunity to save it in terms of if you think he's going to finish that, than if he's 1-on-1. Because a 1-on-1, the player slots it around the goalie, it's over. And then in a penalty, the goalie has time to recover. He's thinking, okay, it's a penalty. I have thought process, and especially if you're at home, your fans are putting pressure on him. And I mean, Barca was flying at the moment, so people forget that PSG did not have the momentum.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, if you really truly think that he's going to score, follow him in the box. If you think that there's a 50-50 chance, let him go through. He scores, okay, well, let's go get another one. We're still an 11-man team. We can still attack comfortably.
Now that red card just completely just changed the game. If you paid attention to the game, if there was no red card, I think it would have been a much different story. But like I said, it just completely changed the game. And then you saw PSG just take advantage that the fact that they had an extra man and they were just all over Barcelona after that. I think the 30th minute.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
know?
even I texted you. I was like, even when PSG were down by one, I said I'd rather be in PSG's position right now than Barca's
Mm-hmm.
because it's just you're able to attack freely, and Barca is really able only to attack really, 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 really carefully.
Yeah, and you saw. I mean, they had a few chances. Barcelona specifically, but like I said, PSG were just completely dominated, wiping them off the park. And I mean, we saw Mbappe get on the score sheet. We saw Vitinha get in the score sheet, and then Ousmane Dembele, who in the season he's only scored 3 goals, and 2 of them have come up against his ex club in Barcelona, which is just insane to really watch and listen to. Now there's another debate going on right now in the Barcelona community with after the having received the red card, and obviously Xavi's forced into a decision of changing his system, changing his attack. Should he have taken off Yamal or Lewandowski? He obviously took off Yamal, but would it have been better to keep Yamal on versus keeping Lewandowski's up top?
The thing with how would I say this? I would have kept Lewandowski because I'm thinking, oh, PSG's gonna score eventually. They're gonna come at us. So I would have taken off Lewandowski. I would have kept Yamal in because he's more of a threat on the counter. He's faster, he's quicker, and sometimes he's able to get into those areas where they really just throw him a through ball, and he gets there and he creates something out of it because he's so quick and fast. Whereas Lewandowski is really just a hold the player where he kind of gets the ball, holds it down, which is good. You needed those players.
Yeah,
But
wouldn't you argue that's what you need when you were a man down? You need someone to hold up into the ball, maybe drag a player to foul you in that
yeah,
type of
but
game in that sense in that instance.
the thing is, against this PSG, you're going to get scored on, especially with the man down. It doesn't. I mean, you go with the full man 11 to PSG. You get scored on twice. Obviously, you're gonna get scored on. You have a man less. Now, I would have kept Yamal on, because of what I just said. Yamal can make something happen off of a counter attack. I don't think Lewandowski can, because I'm really thinking like they're probably gonna score. They're probably gonna tie this matchup. So I'm gonna keep Yamal on for the counters. So we could get a goal back if that does happen.
Mm,
Whereas he's thinking, let's try to lock this game up, but it's really hard to lock a game up versus this PSG team that attacks so well. And when they're not being attacked, they're just so comfortable because defensively they're subpar to what it is to be a top European side. But offensively they're really well.
yeah.
On the counter they'll hit you hard. So I would have kept Yamal on.
Now that's obviously a controversy regarding Xavi and his tactics. There's always been talks about his inexperience. He's already said that he's going to leave at the end of the season, but he did overachieve. A lot of people did not expect for Barcelona to do so well, at least in the quarterfinals. To get to this instance, having won at the Parc des Princes specifically. Now, with that being said, should Xavi change that decision to now stay?
If I'm Xavi, well, hold up. If I'm a Barcelona fan, I'd want Xavi to stay. Just because he has had a process where this Barcelona team has improved. He was there in the mud with them, getting knocked out in the group stage, to Bayern, losing first round. And this Barcelona team has improved. He got to the point where it's a self sabotage of his team to get him knocked out of Champions League, because we're in 11 versus 11 scenario versus PSG, which would have been ideal for Xavi. They would have won. They would have won, and they would have won fairly and decisively, and it would have been a walk in the park, to how it was looking at the Montjuic.
Hmm.
Now the thing is that he is an inexperienced coach, but he has gained experience through that.
Yeah,
He's definitely gained experience. The way he was able to manage the round of 16, and the way that he managed in Paris, where they were down 2-1, and he makes the sub at a perfect time. But the thing is that you need 11 men for that.
yeah. I think with 11 men, it would have been a completely different story. I completely agree with you. Now, lastly, the talk of the town, Dortmund coming up against Atletico Madrid, a Dortmund team who no one expected to be in this position. Not me, and I know not you for sure. They come out strong, scoring two quick goals with Julian Brandt and Ian Matson, who got his first goal in the Champions League. That must be an amazing feeling to get your first goal in Champions League. But you already know that when it comes to Borussia Dortmund, they have an incredible support system. Their fan base, the Yellow Wall, probably one of the best supporter sections in Europe, in the world. They were going electric going into the second half with the fans just going crazy, feeling like they've already won this game. And on paper, they were up 3-2. But then the second half starts, Hummel scores that own goal, and then you see, Atletico get a little bit of rhythm, get a little bit of confidence, and then Correa makes that 4-3 goal, and there's just complete silence in the Signal Iduna Park, and you think maybe Atletico have a shout of coming back, but realistically, you and I were both watching that game. If you're a fan of Atletico Madrid, or if you're a Borussia Dortmund fan, do you really feel that it was so clear that Atletico were going to make that comeback and win the game in the 90 minutes?
The thing is that they did momentarily make a comeback. They
Mm-hmm.
were up by one on aggregate. I don't know if I would have bet that they would have ended the game, up one, because at the Wanda Metropolitano, they weren't able to keep a clean sheet. So going into that, they're not as defensively efficient as they used to be.
Yeah,
If it was this Atletico Madrid side where they're up by one and it's 2017, 2018, or 2016, 2017, they're a wall. I'd bet, they go up by one, it's over. That's a team that you cannot get it. That Diego Simeone team was a team that you would not want to ever have a lead because just to get a goal back is so hard.
it's basically impossible if you think about it. But now you're right that now defensively they are in shambles pretty much, and offensively they have improved a lot. But yeah, defensively they just couldn't do anything, and that's kind of what happened towards the second half as the game went on. I mean, you saw Sabitzer get his goal, and then you saw who's the German forward for Borussia Dortmund? Forgot his name. He scored that header.
What's his name?
I don't know. He starts for Germany as well, but he's an incredible forward. He got the goal, and I mean, out of there, it was just out of their grasp. But there was no way Atletico was going to come back from that. While they tried, there was just no genuine feeling of like, okay, maybe they can do something out of this.
Yeah,
And like we said, when there was no expectation that Dortmund was going to make it this far, they do now, and now they're coming up against a PSG team where they've already faced off twice in this season alone, and they have not been able to win at least against Paris Saint Germain. They were grouped up in the group of death with Milan and Newcastle, where I had predicted PSG were going to come up on top with Milan right under. You predicted that PSG were going to come up on top with Newcastle right under. Realistically, did we even have Dortmund making out of their group?
I didn't. I had them in the Europa League.
Yeah, no, me too. I didn't even think they were gonna make it to Europa League. They've always had that story behind them where they do well for a little bit, and then once it gets to like the business part of the season, that's where they fall flat because they don't have that depth. Now, that being said, I think this season is different. I think there's a little bit of more experience in the squad overall. I mean, you see the likes of Julian Brandt, Matt Hummels, um, Rafael Guerreiro, and I mean, just they have a good squad overall, under a good system. Now, would that be enough against a PSG team? What do you feel your prediction is for that game?
I think it would be enough. So honestly, and especially, I mean, according to UEFA, at least momentarily, this game will be closed at Signal Iduna Park. So if it's closed at Dortmund, let's say they go to PSG, lose by one, if they come back to Dortmund, they could easily close the game in
Yeah,
there.
I
Not
think so
eas-
too.
not not easily saying that PSG is a subpar opponent, but just of what that fan base is at home and how these players just light up at home for some
Mhm.
reason. Everybody's hitting a banger, everybody wants to score,
Mhm.
and it's crazy. It's just something incredible to watch. Now, Borussia Dortmund have to do a better job at defending because I do think that PSG has a better offense than Atletico Madrid. I don't
Oh,
think that's
100%. Yeah.
I don't think that's far fetched at all. And if Atletico Madrid's able to get 4 goals on you in 2 legs, if you're not defensively poised, PSG could very well get more.
They could fucking get 8 if they wanted to, honestly.
Yeah,
Now, what would be more attractive? The reason I would want Dortmund to go through, and I think Dortmund would go through, was just because I don't want to see PSG versus Madrid in the final. And that's what I wanted to ask you. What is more appealing of a final? Would it be appealing to watch PSG versus Madrid or Der Klassiker? So, I mean, that's if Bayern Munich also make it to the final.
the more attractive final would be the Dead Classicer. The more, how would I say, that final would sell. Everybody wants to watch that. Because we had one in 2013 where we saw it, but we didn't really know what was going on. During that moment.
Yeah, we were a lot younger. I mean, I was like 12 years old, and if I was 12 years old, you were like 10. So,
Yeah, so it was just a while back, and it's something that we would like to watch that now,
mhm.
especially with just the story and
And I think if that if that matchup were to happen, I think Borussia Dortmund have such a greater chance now than ever before, having already beat Bayern Munich this season. I think they beat them like 2-0, 3-0 at home.
Yeah, but the thing about a Champions League final is that it's that really nothing matters there.
Mhm.
No statistic, not no team is better than the other because they're both there for a reason. You know, it's the
Especially in a Clasico like that.
I mean the Der Classic is the more desirable final. I would want to watch that. You know,
Yeah. Now
because
that leads me to my hot take and how we're going to end off the video today. Is the Bundesliga a better league than the Prem? Thinking about it, you got two Bundesliga sides in the semifinals compared to none of England's top six in Europe at all. I mean, they were already eliminated from the Champions League. Yeah, you still have Liverpool. They're in the quarterfinals against Atalanta,
they're
but
practically out
down 3-0, practically out. Yeah, Bayer Leverkusen
up to.
up two against West Ham, and they're closing that game, I think, in West Ham. But I mean, you don't see Bayer Leverkusen losing this season at all, and that's another reason as to why I think the Bundesliga is a lot better than the Prem, at least just this season, just because you have a German team like Bayer Leverkusen going invincible all season and a possible trouble, and then another potential all German final compared to 11 years ago when you had an all German final.
The thing of these instances of the Champions League is that no, I don't think Bundesliga is better than the Prem, and I'm going to tell you why. Because Borussia Dortmund and Bayern Munich stopped worrying about the league a long time ago.
Mhm.
Their whole focus and really all the players that they really want to keep fit were for solely the Champions League. You know, teams like Manchester City and Arsenal, they really had to use their best players in both competitions in the Prem. Well, three competitions for City, where it was the Prem, the FA Cup, and the Champions League. Now, just because it happens one time, doesn't make it like, oh, the Bundesliga is now better than the Prem. They had a better season, or they had a really good season just because they didn't have to compete for the Bundesliga because it was practically lost already. Because in the last six Champions Leagues, well, out of the past five Champions Leagues, three have been won by a Premier League side. And in the last six, there's been seven English teams in these finals. 7 out of 12 teams that have qualified in the last six Champions Leagues have
Mhm.
been English sides. So out of the past 5 years, I mean, this is recent history, and even in two of these finals, we have an all English final. So the Prem is, in my opinion, in the past 5 years has been the better side, and is still the better side, just because the title race is really, really close this year, where all three sides want to win, is the reason why we're not able to see them to their full potential in the Champions League. And unlike them, well, how I said, Bayern Munich and Borussia, they
They're
don't
out.
worry
They're
about that.
done with the league. Yeah, you're right. I didn't think about it that way. All right, you win this round, bro. But if anyone's listening, whoever's listening, let us know who you think has a better league, the Bundesliga or the Prem. Obviously, the Bundesliga get a lot of hate because they are considered a farmers' league, just like the league on the Premier League. There's no doubt they are one of the best leagues in the world. But I just thought it would be interesting to have a little conversation about that. But that pretty much wraps up our Champions League quarterfinal takes. And thank you, Tomas, for always helping me out in the pod. Make sure to follow CharlaFootball on all social media platforms. I'll make sure to link them down below. Make sure to check out our website and support your small creators, because without our fans, without listeners, only together can we really grow. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you guys on the next one.